Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
And I'm Elliot.
And we're really glad you're here.
And speaking of here, let me slip in a quick word about there.
What?
Yeah.
There where?
Just go with me. So,
okay.
And you ruined a great segue. So there.
I'm here to ruin things. Go ahead.
There is our website, sohere'smystory.com.
Okay.
And on sohere'smystory.com, we can get your comments. We give extra information, and it's an overall show notes. It's a third dimension.
We will. None of those things are there now.
But they will be.
They will be there
and
soon.
They might be when somebody's listening to this.
Because here's the thing. Today, we're finally starting this thing. I'm so excited.
I know.
It's
We've been talking about this for months.
A really, really, really long time. We actually originally wanted to launch in January. So we're a mere 5-6 months behind schedule. No harm there.
Right, which is kind of how business works.
Yes. So we are here. We're here. I'm super excited to get started. And okay, so I have a question for you, Elliot, though. I thought of a little road bump here. We agreed that we would not share our stories ahead of time because we didn't want to overthink what we would do with them, if for no other reason that it would completely slaughter the magic of what happens when you tell a story and your mind bounces off to something else.
Right, and it's not scripted.
And it's not, with the whole, we will never be scripting this. I can promise you that. But if we don't know what the other one's stories are about, how do we decide who goes first?
Okay. All right. We can kind of give a little description, but here's the thing. What we literally just wrote after about 94 tries was this. Here's the description.
Okay, read it back
I'm going to read it. So Here's My Story is the only business podcast that promises wildly useful lessons from the poignant, the absurd, and the seemingly irrelevant. So that's our standard.
Right.
Now.
Right. That still doesn't help on who goes first.
Okay.
But thank you for rereading that.
You're welcome. And keeping that in mind, here, my story has to do with, and I promise.
So maybe we're looking for the most absurd?
Well, I'll tell you, I promise I can make this relevant, but my story has to do with my old car and a bunch of parking tickets.
Okay, well, my story has to do with peeing your pants.
You win.
So here's my story. This won't come as a shock to you, Elliot, because obviously that's a big part of why we decided to do this little project. I have this life philosophy that if it makes for a good story, it was a good time, which, is probably best exemplified by the fact that my family and I just took an RV trip last week. Right. We rented an RV for the first time, never having stepped foot in an RV. So, but that's a story for another podcast. But it does actually broaden the scope of what ends up being considered a good day, because even the stuff that is terrible at the time, it makes for a good story later, is good. And so never has this been more evident to me than something that actually happened at my gym last week. So there are these horrible, awful things we're having to do this month called angry cat curls, which is you're on your hands and knees and you have to hunch up your back like a cat and hold it for 90 seconds. And it's pretty, it's pretty interminable actually. And so there's been this kind of running joke or whatever you want to call it, that someone has to tell you a story while you are doing your 60 seconds or 90 seconds, however long your thing is, because it makes the time go faster. Right. So there was a woman there last month who not only was insisting on her stories, but because she had this horrible day, just really bad, like spectacular failure kind of day, that she was insisting that somebody tell her a horrible failure story, like an absolute end of the road, I was humiliated, embarrassed kind of story. Well, I was off to the side and I was kind of laughing. I'm like, okay, I'm game. Let me think. Well, the first person who steps up with a story tells, I was 7 and wanted to press my older cousin, and long story short, she ends up peeing her pants in front of this cousin. So I was like, wow, never met this person. They're jumping in with a peed my pants story. Yeah. Impressive, right?
Yeah, it is.
But I'm kind of excited because I love backscene stories. I love hearing stories that no one wants to tell. So lo and behold, someone else steps up with I peed my pants till I was 10 years old, or 6th grade or whatever. Last time I peed my pants, that's how he started the story. Last time I peed my pants was 6th grade.
Oh my God.
At this point, I'm getting you can just tell, I'm all excited. I'm like, what is happening here? Because not all these people even really know each other. And yet, not only are they not embarrassed by or deterred by this embarrassing story, but there is something like magic happening. And then someone else is like, ooh, I have one. And it became this I was just in awe, the not just like the willingness, but like also the excitement and the sense of connection and community and humanity and like joy. I can't put enough words to it of this magic thing that happened where, and here's what fascinated me and why I wanted to bring it up. I think there's this weird counterintuitive perception that people don't want to share those stories. And it's true. It's not the story you're going to lead with on your first time you meet somebody in theory. And yet what is also true is that given a moment and somebody else sharing their story, like had that first person not told that story, the rest of those stories would not have happened. But because she jumped in with that one, suddenly people were like jumping in like, ooh, 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 I have another one. I have another one. I have another one. And so that's where I wanted to start because that felt so important because I feel like it's at the core of something that you and I really want to get at in this entire podcast. The whole reason we're doing it felt like it was happening in that moment.
Right. Well, there has to be a safe space, and that safe space can be created by a number of things. It can be created because somebody told the first story.
Yeah.
So you can't judge me if you're not going to judge her.
Right.
And it's rare that you're going to judge both of us together.
Right.
So there's kind of that safety in numbers thing. There's also the community that you're a part of. If nobody knows you, if you just started this and you're not on a first date and you're not at your job so that you're going to be judged. And, so that might be it. Or you formed this non-judgmental community. And there's also this thing about, I'll tell you real quick as an aside, and I promise I can relate this, but my whole life, I never liked Halloween. I hated Halloween. I didn't
Insert tangent number 1.
Yes. I didn't like dressing up. It just made no sense to me. Anyway.
And let me tell you about cauliflower.
Yes. And then we'll go right on to cauliflower. So I didn't like dressing up. Anyway, so one day when my kids were little, I decided that I was going to not only dress up, I was going to dress up in the most ridiculous thing I could find. So I didn't tell anybody. And I got this huge bunny suit. It was,
of course,
full body, pink bunny, big ears, the whole 9 yards. And I didn't tell my wife. I sneaked into the house from this costume place. And so when she was helping get the kids into their costumes, I came down, padding downstairs in this big bunny suit. And I took them around trick-or-treating, but the oddest thing was, and this is where it gets relevant, I was much more animated. I was waving to people, kids were coming up and hugging me, whatever, because I was anonymous inside this huge bunny suit. So there's something about anonymity that's freeing, and whether it's anonymity from a physical perspective, as in that experience, or whether it's an anonymity and non-judgmental because you're not expected to be a certain person. You're not expected to say a certain thing or play a certain role, and there's safety in numbers, but it's actually freeing.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's funny when you first said safe space, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit, not because I disagree with that.
No, I know. It sounds like snowflakes.
It does. I'm like, oh, yeah. But it's not that I disagree with it. I think it comes with this like imagined high bar of like, I don't know, I feel like there need to be like pillows and soft music and like, gentle murmurings to something to be like a safe space. No. And I think what got me so excited about that moment in my gym and what gets me so excited about this project that we're doing, I actually suspect that people are dying to tell these stories. They're
I think you're
dying
right.
to share them, and actually creating a safe space isn't terribly difficult. It doesn't take a lot of work. It's not magic. Sometimes, absolutely, anonymity can certainly help. I mean, that creates a whole level, and we're certainly planning on creating some opportunities for some anonymity, including our witness protection line, our business confessional line, where you can share your stories with us, and you don't even have to tell us who you are. Business secrets line. We're going to do that, but in that case, it was just simply this. I don't know how else to say it, but like an agreement that we were going to do it. There was this like very quickly agreed upon social contract in that moment, very invisibly done and instantly happened, where we were going to share those things. And it all happened because this one person did it. And here's the really neat thing that happened is, because some of us do know each other pretty well. And after that sort of like batting around these hysterical stories, it also made the whole event way more fun. this one woman turned to me and asked me a very personal, like, spirituality question. She was like, I'm curious if you like, and it was a very vulnerable kind of question. And I can't prove this for certain because she may have asked me that question no matter what. But there was something about our acknowledged, shared humanity of goofy, embarrassing stories that made truly bigger, vulnerable things like even easier to talk about. And that's what excites me about this project for us is I feel like some of the most important business conversations aren't being had because of like things people think they can't talk about.
No, I think that's right. And it didn't really hit me until just now as you were talking about it. But one of the things that I would relate it to, as you know, I teach a public speaking course. Mm-hmm. And so the first speech, you have these group of kids, I call them kids, they're 19, 20 years old, whatever. Mm-hmm. They're united possibly only in the fact that they hate public speaking, and they're in this required course. And so the first speech that they have to give is basically about them, what made me who I am. And really what I expect and what I normally get is, this is why I chose my major. And mm-hmm. It's fine. It just gets them in front of the class. Well, a couple semesters ago, this one guy stood up and he started talking, and he's very hesitant. And I chalked it up as I was listening to the fact that he probably doesn't like public speaking.
Sure.
But I realized, and I think the class realized, what was happening was that for the first time anywhere, let alone in front of a group, but not to his parents, not to his best friends, not first time anywhere, he was announcing that he was gay.
Oh, wow.
And he was the first one up. And there was like this stunned silence, and then kind of this appreciation for it, but how hard that was for him. And then one by one, at this one class, doesn't happen every semester, but in this one class, because he did this, you started getting these incredibly personal stories. Mm-hmm. And one of them that I recall was about this woman who was talking about how her parents divorced, and she came to realize, and she said, I don't really think I said this to anybody, but I came to realize that I was incredibly relieved when my dad left. I didn't miss him. I was supposed to miss him. I was supposed to be broken up, but it was really a great thing. Wow. And so one by one they were talking, and some of them were just not good. That's
pretty powerful.
But very powerful experiences.
But they were more authentic and honest.
It was very authentic and honest. And there was, I won't say there was a pressure, but it was almost like the people who probably had planned to say, this is why I chose my major. Right. They started to think, no, that's not what this conversation is about. That's not what this place is about.
There is a video by someone, and it's a voiceover over this scene that was recorded at some sort of outdoor music festival. And it's him narrating how you start a movement in like 3 minutes or less. Have you not seen this?
No.
Oh my Lord. It will absolutely be in the show notes. It's my favorite thing ever. It's this crazy guy. I think he's shirtless, like he's dancing wackily at this, wackily, that's not even a word. Yeah, whatever. It's goofy dancing, and he calls him the lone nut, that there has to be this lone nut. And then the importance of the first followers, because once there's like 3, it's a group and you're not a lone nut, but the first followers are just as important as the lone nut.
Right. There's critical mass.
There is critical. Well, and then he builds and then a few more people join. And then there's this very important point where you really build critical mass because you're still early enough to be on the cool edge, but you're not so early that you're taking a huge risk. But if you go now, you won't be the people who were left behind and didn't get in on it. You know, that moment. But this all happens in 3 minutes until the whole crowd is dancing. It goes from this one lone nut to, and that's, at my gym, that first woman who told her pee in her pants because she couldn't get her overalls off, and in her, her cousin that she wanted to impress was the one they sent into the bathroom to find her. That she was the lone nut in that moment. And it made being the first follower so easy. In fact, it was like exciting. And I think that's what I want for this. I want us to be the lone nut, the lone nuts of telling these stories that because you know how it is. You go to business events and people, I think they feel like they always have to tell business is booming and things are great. And apparently you have to use your used car salesman voice for it. But
yeah, you have to say certain things, and if you want to talk about problems in business, you really talk about other people.
Right.
Well, I know
My
this guy,
people
boy, he
will do
didn't
this.
have the cash reserves to do whatever, or he expanded too quickly, or she really didn't have good customers. Of course, that would never happen to me or anybody in this conversation, but those people out there are just not as good. And so
I
do get
didn't
into
totally forget to do invoicing for like 3 months. I would never do something like that.
that. Right. So that's right. There's this hard shell that you have to put on when you go into these business networking events. That's the farthest thing from a genuine conversation.
Well, and I would actually, that's part of the reason I want to do this is I think I call BS on that. I think that's what's wrong with a lot of things. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious. Do you have, like, if I did put you on the spot, do you have your version, the business version of I peed my pants story? Because I think I have one I'm trying to think of a good one. I have several.
I have quite a few stories of how I made incredible mistakes.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that I have one that carries with it the emotional baggage of a business I peed my pants story. But I can tell you, and this is going to sound boring in comparison, but one of the things I look at is I had always tied, for some dysfunctional reason, I had always tied the number of lawyers in my law firm to success. And that meant that if, I'm the only partner here, so if I had 6 lawyers, I was really pretty bright. But if I had 8 or 9 lawyers working for me and they were all working for me just on my clients, then I was, of course, a business genius. But if I had to cut down to 3, then I was a failure. And anyway, and you can make all the jokes you want, but I'm telling you that the mindset of size equals success is real. And it's not just a male phenomenon when it comes to business. But so there came a time.
You would make that joke just as I took a sip of it.
I would. That's what I was going for. But
we almost had our first spit take.
Which would have been cool. Now that I think about it.
Kind of disappointed.
Time it better.
Yeah.
But the thing is, so I had gotten the firm up to a pretty good size, and then the recession hit. And I didn't react. I don't like firing people. I have personal loyalty to people. And I just kept watching the numbers, but thinking, I see where it's going. But if I have one more good month, like a guy in a casino, if I'm losing all this money, but one good roll. So if I have one more good month, this would work. And I finally had to let people go, and I had to go into my line of credit. I had to do all this stuff because business genius that I was, because I had a larger firm. I saw what was coming. I refused to believe it. And I had too much ego tied up into the size of the firm that I really was worried. I would go to my kids' concerts and I wouldn't be listening to a note. I would be thinking, geez, I got to make payroll and I've got this and I'm into my line and I'm doing this. And there's a huge difference between doing that out of conscious choice and doing it because like ego's choosing for you, or like they're just different things. Yeah, and I'm supposed to be, in my role, I'm supposed to be advising businesses, right? And yet I'm thinking
that's the pee my pants part of it. Like even if you privately pee your pants, it's just as well. Maybe it's not just as bad as if other people know, but it's still there. And I think to you knew that you were not practicing good business, which probably eroded your confidence in like, wait a minute, I'm advising other people. Like,
right. So you feel less than, and you go into these, or I went into these networking things, just feeling like I don't even want to be in these conversations because I can't speak with this air of superiority or all that. It's not authentic. It's not who I was, because I really had screwed up. And I knew I had screwed up, and I had to come face to face. I had to bring in an outside consultant to come in who would see the same numbers I did and who would say, Elliot,
you're being an idiot.
You're being an idiot. This is what, if you want your company to survive, you've got to cut here. You've got to cut here. You've got to do this. You've got to let her go. You've got to let him go. But you're hitting on a very important part though, which is, because it's funny, when I put you on the spot to tell a story, and by the way, never did I imagine that I would say pee your pants so many times in one. I didn't even think I would really go there, but you said it doesn't have that emotional baggage of publicly peeing your pants, and something really landed for me, which is part of the problem with most business people's pee your pants story is that they're doing it alone somewhere in a room, locked off with no one else looking in, no one else seeing it. Part of the reason you got out of it was you like let someone in on what was going on. You brought them in, you shared the story, you let them look at what was happening. Yeah, I did. And the hard thing was I still have, I shouldn't be past tense, have a lot of respect for this person. So I've got 2 things going on. Number one,
Oh, yeah.
I have a lot of respect for her, and I'm going to show her that I'm not worthy of respect.
Right.
And I think before I make that call, that she thinks of me. You know, she has respect for me. She thinks I know what I'm doing. And yet I'm going to reveal to her that it's all a facade because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm clearly an idiot. I shouldn't be in the same room. And there's no reason she should have respect for me. And
you're not being, and I just want to pause for a second. You're not being dramatic. It feels
that's
dire,
exactly what
right?
I was thinking.
Yeah.
I know it sounds... It may sound, if you haven't been in that situation, and I'm betting that more of our listeners have been in that situation than haven't, or similar.
I think that's a safe bet.
But if you haven't been in that situation, you may think that I'm being glib about it or almost, kind of putting a comedic spin on it. But those are the things that I would think about. Do I call her? My God. I mean, I think she has respect for me. She's referred clients to me. Mm-hmm. She must think that I'm intelligent. I know how to guide businesses, and I have to call her in, show her my book, show her everything, and show her that I'm nothing like the success that I think she imagines me to be. And that was one of the most painful things I've had to do.
No, I totally get it. And I think even if it's not something where your business is on the line like that, sometimes I find with my clients that they're even just really simple things. They like really simple questions that they think they're far too far along to ask someone. And so they don't ask. And yet then they're like hobbling along. But the story when I asked you that question for me that popped up again, much like you, it happened very privately. Yeah. And this was incredibly early. This is when I was still COO of the architecture firm. And I was trying to do this work on the side a little bit in my spare time. And I hysterically, it might help to explain why it had not been growing terribly well. But I mean, this will not be the last time you hear me refer to that. It's like watching someone else parallel park a car. When you hear this story, you're like, oh dear, like it's so bad. It's so embarrassing because it's so obvious. But in that moment, when I caught myself doing it, I mean, clearly I'd been doing this for a while and I have no explanation for it. It's absolutely inane. But I was doing a fair amount of networking. I was doing some weekly newsletter thing that I call weekly wake ups that was getting forwarded a lot. I was starting to get some momentum. And it was not the first time that it happened, but it was the first time that I noticed that this was my reaction. I got an email from someone who said, Jody, I read your thing here, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I'm really interested in talking with you about your services. I think I might be interested. And I caught myself do the following. I did sort of like the kind of fist bump movement. Yeah. I was like, awesome. And I reached up and I archived the email as if that was the win. Like, yes, someone's interested in me. Done. And I was like, oh my goodness. And while my behaviors were not always up to that point that obvious, it wasn't like I was archiving all the interests. I know you're like, geez, Jody, I didn't know you were going to go that dark.
No, I was thinking about, I pity the guy that asked you to prom. Yes. Thank you. And then you're
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
No, I think but what I realized in that moment with some self-reflection was a whole string of less obvious, but equally as self-sabotaging behaviors where somewhere in my brain, the interest was the close. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, someone, because for a while that was the first mark that I was looking to get. And, so anyway, and I had closed sales, so it wasn't like I was doing it all the time, but just even the fact that would ever happen was really interesting. And still today, if I'm feeling at all overwhelmed, and this is what fascinates me about our spin, the places you spin out, don't tend to go away, I don't think. They just show up differently. I have noticed even very recently that if I am overwhelmed, I certainly don't archive the emails, but I won't respond to them immediately. I'm like, oh, cool, someone's interested. And I put it aside for my special come back later time. And so that now I know is a trigger and I watch for that. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing. I need to and I have some corrective behaviors for it. But, it makes no sense. I don't even need to figure out why I do that. That's not the point here. The point is that I think everyone has either quirky oddities like that or places they get hung up. I mean, what I heard in your story was a really wonderful, wonderful thing about you as a business leader of not wanting to you don't hire and fire just willy-nilly. You respect the people's lives that you're taking responsibility for. That's a great thing. But then where does it actually become a hindrance? We all have these traps. So I love hearing other people's pee their pants stories.
Well, but part of it is like even in the hire and fire, part of it is, of course, I feel a responsibility to the people who decided that I'm going to spend my time in my professional career, I'm going to invest in whatever it is you're doing, your vision, what you've built, et cetera. So I do feel a responsibility. I don't want them to ever go home and think, geez, I wish I hadn't started working with Elliot. So that's part of it. But part of it is also an ego thing, like, which is not really defensible, but it's certainly there, which is if I go to somebody and say, I'm firing you because you can't do the job. Okay. There's a whole nother series of episodes on that conversation.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that.
But that doesn't reflect internally so much right at the outset. But if I say, I'm firing you because what I built can't sustain the promise I made to you when I hired you.
Yep.
I can't afford you. Then it's my failure.
Yep.
And there's a whole lot of internal struggle that's incorporated into that. I failed. I have to recognize I failed. Then I have to tell people that I failed.
And other people have to bear the consequences of my failure.
And they have to bear the consequences of my failure.
No,
it's
powerful.
a huge thing.
It's powerful. And I will say that those two things, that's why I think having somebody else looking can be so helpful, because you can conflate those things. Like they can those competing things, even if you recognize your own ego in it, like then right behind it's, but I'm responsible for those people. And when you can't separate them into two things, it makes it even harder. That's why I think third parties are helpful to be like, okay, there's actually two things in there.
Well, and I think the third parties are also helpful because whether you identify it or not, if there are those two things in there, then left to your own devices, you tend to try and straddle them to satisfy both.
Yes.
So in the hiring fire, because it's an easy illustration, I could go into somebody and say, I'm going to have to, what I should say is, I'm going to have to let you go. I can't afford you. I'm really sorry, and do what I can for that person. But if I try to straddle, I'm like, I'm going to have to, I guess, put you on furlough for 3 weeks. I'll bring you back. I mean, I just can't, when I know damn well,
right, that ain't happening.
I can't afford them and I can't bring them back. But I might say, it's not looking good, when really I have to say, you know what, I can't afford you.
It's over.
It's over. You have to rip the Band-Aid off. But a lot of times if you're serving two masters, you're not going to...
It dilutes the next step.
Yeah, there's no clear path. And that's why bringing in somebody who either tells you, hey, you know what, your suspicion was right. It is as bad as you think it is and you better move, or... Hey,
well, and we'll definitely come back to this a lot. It's that role of having somebody who can help you validate or debunk the uncertainties.
Right.
So it's like, help me make sure I'm not missing something here before I go ruin somebody's day, life, week, whatever. Like, help me make sure there's no other option here. But so where I want to come back to, because we've sort of picked around a bunch of the things. I know we're going to be coming back to a lot on this, but for me, like I want to hear our listeners' stories. Like I want to start collecting them. We plan for that to be a big part of this show, not just you and I talking ad nauseum. Here's a couple ways that you can reach us to share those stories.
You could call us toll free at 1-833-83-STORY, or you could email us at talktous@sohere'smystory.com.
Are you going to repeat those like it's a mattress?
Yes, you can call us toll free at 1-833-83-STORY.
Perfect.
Or talk to us at sohere'smystory.com.
Okay, I'm going to do mine in a not announcer voice.
Okay.
If you want to find us on Facebook, you can search for So Here's My Story and either leave a comment, or you can send us a direct message by hitting the send message button.
And when you do that, what we're really looking for is, we're not doing, obviously, advertisements. And this is why I'm a success story today. It doesn't have to end well. It doesn't have to be tied up in a neat bow. It doesn't have to have a resolution. It could be something you're worried about now. It could be something that you can't tell your employees and you don't want to talk to your spouse about, and you don't want to cause people concern, because, we're not going to, unless you say, please feel free to use my name. We're not going to use your name. And we're not going to say, John from a small tile manufacturing company in Galveston, well, actually on the outskirts of Galveston in a small suburb of Galveston. We're not going to identify you specifically, but I know we're betting that what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what concerns you, the deepest, darkest fears that you have that might be paralyzing you or causing you to spin in circles, is something that you're going to find a lot of people are thinking about.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think of it as like an invitation. Like I want to invite people to be a lone nut with us.
Yes.
To jump on the bandwagon, be that lady at my gym who told the first peace story. And, and we're figuring this out as we go too. So, on this voice line that we've mentioned, if there's part of the story that we can use, because we would love to share people telling their stories, the actual audio of it. If there's part of it you don't want us to share, say that. Say like, you can share this part, but here are the details that I have to tell you, or the story doesn't make sense, but don't share this part. And we'll work with you. And
right, we can change the names to protect the innocent, but what you're bringing,
but you don't get to pick what name we choose.
Correct.
Don't be mad if we call you Bernard or
but what you're bringing up is likely to be something that really sparks a conversation that has to be had.
If it's haunting you, it's haunting someone else.
So that's our story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for everyone who's listening in, and we're especially grateful to all of our patrons who've joined us over at patreon.com to support our efforts here. And we hope to see you next week.
And listen, having told our story, we'd love to hear yours.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say is, the floor is yours. Go to sohere'smystory.com and join the conversation.
Wait, before you go, there are 3 things that we really want you to know.
First, you can find show notes and links to all of the random things we happen to mention during the episode by visiting our website, sohere'smystory.com.
The second thing is, we like to talk.
And not just to each other.
That's right. So what we really want to hear is your story. So while you're there, you'll also find links to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways to contact us with questions, suggestions, or even to share your own story.
And if you love the show and want to support future episodes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon page where we share our extra bonus content.
Or if you can't support us financially, it'd be great if you could leave us a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast service you use to listen to us. And be sure to tell all your friends.
Until next time.